for the last 12 chapters. So if we can get through this part, if we had to not come back Monday or something for a while, I'd feel pretty good about it. I don't know if we're even going to finish it now. So again, I'll stop early so you can show them to me, and I'll also, whether we're here or not, and of course weather's a factor also, but I will do the test. I'll have the test for you early next week, as well as the last quiz. I should be caught up. This is just the second week we're in, so we're in pretty good shape. I mentioned that yesterday. So we're looking at the questions for 24 through 29. Do you have those? All right, so what we're going to do, let's just talk about it. All right, what I'm going to do is kind of give you, I'll give you a grade, like a participation grade. We don't do that very often here, but I do that sometimes in other classes. If you look at that chapter, if you don't have any questions, then you just take a look at the book, or think about the book. This was all pretty much the Peter Wilkes scandal, and so we need to cover that. There's a lot of detail here. Wish I'd had the chapter. But anyway, I'm going to go around the room and ask you to take a minute to think about it, to look at it, and then I'm going to ask everybody to share something. This is the quiz we took the other day, and we're behind, actually.
Can we go ahead and share something now?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for everybody to, I'll give you just a second. This is not ideal, and I will give you a copy of this, but I'm going to actually, in addition to that, kind of read the question. I'm not expecting you to write all these questions down, but at least the first ones we do, the ones we get done today, I will get you a copy of it. So why don't we start? You can raise your hand and volunteer. Chapter 24 through 29, and like if I read one of the questions, I'm going to ask you to write it down, and then we'll answer it. Yeah.
Well, when the king and the duke pose as, I think the brothers' names are William.
Harvey, very good.
William and Harvey, and they start like crying and everything to poor people. Everyone was convinced that it was them except the doctor, and that was kind of like the looming threat for them, because he was trying to raise a point that it might not be them.
Right. So I'd ask you to write this down. Again, you don't have the questions in front of you, but I'm going to ask you to, it would be number 6 when you get them, but who are they? Like, who are these two people? Who are they pretending to be? Do you want to follow through that?
Well, Peter Wilkes died, and his two brothers were the ones that were going to attend the funeral for it, and his will is split up between his brothers and his daughters. So because William and Harvey weren't really there yet, the king and the duke took the opportunity to pose them.
All right, and they're from England. So the king who's playing, I can't remember which is which, I never can get that, but the king is playing one of them, I think it's William. He has a phony British accent, so he's trying to pretend like he's British. Harvey is the other guy. What is his thing? I'm talking about the two brothers. One of them is William, and he is the doctor, or the one who's the king. I can't remember if I got that right. I can't. Okay, William. He's a he's a preacher, is what he is. But what about William, the other one? There's something about him. Yeah. He's mute, and so he cannot speak, which is fortunate actually, because that would even be more give him away more.
Is he deaf too, or just mute?
Most people are both, and I can't remember in his case. I think they signed, so they signed each other. So yeah, I'd say he's deaf and mute. So what's the role, the first question also is, what's the role Huck is gonna play in this? And then we'll go to the next person, yeah,
So Huck's gonna pretend to be the servant, right?
that's right. And Jameson, you can add anything else if you want to. I'm gonna give you credit for sharing today, but, what can you add to that? Anything on your own?
Well, he pretended to be a servant, and he struggled like morally with this because he felt like what he was doing to the people was like really wrong, and like he knew that the girls, like his daughter, were like all like good people, so he was like upset to be like a part of like stemming them.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because Huck has fooled people before and he hadn't felt bad about it. Remember he didn't fool people. Remember the guys on the steamboat? He allowed them to die. He saw Buck, his friend, die. He couldn't do much about that. But here's one time in the book that he tries to change the situation. He actually does something to help somebody, and later, I think you read it, he actually tells the truth, which is something he usually doesn't do. He tells it. A good point. Did you want to go next? I saw your hand up a minute. Any point you want to make?
That when the king and the duke were in the basement looking at the money, they were supposed to have $6,000 and ended up being $415 short. So they added some of their own money just to make it even more convincing.
Yeah.
And I would assume that they then, no, because that was the money that was betrothed to the daughters.
Yes.
And Huck then, well, the king and the duke were going to steal the $6,000. Huck took it, hid it basically where he was sleeping, and ended up putting it in the coffin, and
Right.
it was buried in the coffin.
You will get these questions, and all that's on the questions, so you can probably do those on your own, but, right, all that's true. And of course, it's ironic that they put their own money into the 6,000, because somebody had stolen $413 from it, so they didn't want to look like they had stolen it, so they had to pay into money that they were gonna steal. Of course, what they were paying in was money that they had also stolen. You know, they don't have any money, they didn't earn it, honestly, anything. I thought that was an irony and sort of some humor. Emma, you had your hand up. Anything you wanna share? Or I can ask, I've got questions here, I'll ask
Did
you.
you ask me a question?
Yeah, okay, how did the king and the duke know about William and Harvey?
Well, before they arrived, they stopped on the river because somebody was like waiting there with a carpetbag for a steamboat, and he came aboard their raft, and they asked him like where he was going, and he said that he was going there, and they kept asking him questions about Peter Wilkes and like his friends, his family, what happened to him, and they basically started asking him like really, really personal questions. That way they would get to know the family better.
What does it tell you about being a con man, or a, what's that term, Jameson, you use? I don't know why I can't remember that. What does it take to be that kind of person? And that just proves it.
It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, information. They use information. And they got to be smart enough and clever enough to get the information, and it's always just enough information. They don't need to know everything because they're so smart and bold that they make other stuff up. But they find out what they need to know, and they make the most out of it. How about it, Si? Anything you want to add?
I'm not asking a question.
Okay, well, when they brought the money back, you know, the $6,000, which they had to take part of their own money and put into it, they want to give it directly to the girl, what's her name, Mary Ann? I know why I can't. They want to give it to her, or Mary Jane. What does she do with it? Do you remember, anybody remember what she does with it? Yeah.
She gives it to the convent.
Right, because that Dr. Robinson is the one guy who disagrees with them. And how is this whole situation another example of sentimentalism? Remember, over emotion, out emotion.
They feel bad for the convent because as far as I know, they're the two grieving brothers of the dead ones, so they try to give them as much sympathy as possible.
Right, I mean, they are at a vulnerable point. They've just lost their dad, and they don't, you know, they're already vulnerable, they're weak, and so they get fooled. It's easy to get fooled with him like that.
Well, I think it's in chapter 29. When the real brothers come back, the person was asking them questions to see who was the real ones, and he asked them to what tattoo he had, and they said an arrow, and then one person said the initials, and then he asked them another question to use their handwriting, but since one of them broke his arm, they
Again, that's a great scene. That was the first one, right? That was the first test, the writing test. But then it turns out the real Harvey, of course, he can't write, and so that wasn't work. And then immediately they come up with another test. They have no idea. They've never known Peter Will. Have no idea what's tattooed to him. But when they ask him, does he hesitate? Does he think about it? No. I mean, frankly, I'm not sure. As a teacher, I think we know how to spot liars and cheaters. I mean, we kind of have a sense of that. But in real life, I'm sure I've been lied to and cheated because they're really not paying attention. What is it that allows people to lie to you, that you believe a lie? What is it? What are the qualities you have to be a good liar?
Manipulation.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Sympathetic.
You gotta adhere to their,
Go to their emotions.
you gotta adhere to their emotions, their emotional weaknesses. You gotta exploit it for your own.
All right. I think, you didn't mention confidence. Remember, they're called confidence men. I think at this point, if he had hesitated, what's the tattoo? Tattooed to your brother's arm or something, and he had to think, he didn't have to think about it. He thought, the thing I admire about these people, not that they are liars, but they think on their feet. If they could have used those qualities for good instead of bad, and that's what you always say about criminals, right? They're really smart. Why can't they use it for good? We'll have to answer that sometime, yeah.
Wasn't it another test for them to produce the $6,000, to have it in hand or something? And then neither of them could find it
Well,
because
of course,
it was taken off
it's missing. They don't know where it is,
Yeah.
and neither does Mary Jane knows where it is. Why?
she was in the Culpeper.
Huck told her where it was. It's the first time in the book that he told the truth. He likes her. I think she's older than he is, but he admires her, and he feels sorry for her. All right, yes, Lou.
But the reason that Huck likes that family so much is because he has a sentiment towards that, because he doesn't have a family for himself. So he admires.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Just like he liked the Grangerfords for the same reason. He was willing to overlook their murdering until he finally saw it. All right, so going through here, we've got most of these. What is the coup de grace? You know what I mean by that? The death blow. What's the thing that the king does to this is going to make the most money? They have this $6,000. Yes, they would inherit the house, but that's not enough for them. What in addition do they want to do?
Doesn't he sell the estate that the other brothers own for even more money?
Which
along
includes what?
with the slave.
Yeah, he's gonna sell the slaves, and of course, that's what most people that are greedy, they go too far. And it's the going too far that gets them in trouble, and that's finally what I think cost Huck his allegiance to them, is when they tried to sell them.
and separate them.
What?
Tried to separate a slave family.
That's right. Somebody made a really interesting comment that I thought was very interesting, because a lot of people would disagree with this. Do you have any sympathy for this slaveholding family, the fact that they care enough for their slaves that they don't want to separate them? That's ridiculous. They're terrible people because they own slaves. But is this a good thing that they care about these families? Yeah.
Well, I think in their mind, they're doing the right thing, and a lot of times, other than the fact of actually owning the slaves, which is something you obviously can't ignore, specifically that family appears to be really nice and kind to their slaves and gives them good living conditions and all that, as opposed to like some other plantations. But even though they have the wrong idea in their head, which is owning slaves, they're still doing for like the right things and treating them almost human, like family.
Yeah, we hadn't talked about this. The ugly class was able to read a book where every single person in the book, there was nobody in the book that anybody really liked. And yet they liked, I had a student tell me that about, it's all the King's Men. If you ever read it, I'd recommend it. But she said, you know, I don't like any of the people in the book, and yet I like the book. The author's point was that everybody has sin. Now, he wouldn't have used the term sin. We use it all the time. I can't think of another word, but everybody has moral flaws. And the people that lived during the slavery, that was a huge moral flaw, is to justify having slaves. And don't forget, Huck never condemned slavery. He doesn't want to be an abolitionist, which means getting, freeing all the slaves. He just likes one slave. But it starts there, right? I mean, if you start to like one person, not that you're going to like everybody of another race or religion, because that's also true. We don't like everybody, but at least they're not stereotyping again. Let's see. Why don't we go to Brian? Give me something. Yeah. Anything about the book?
Well, I mean, is like a certain question or is it?
Well, let me ask you. Huck lies, but I think we may have mentioned this yesterday. What's the difference between his lies? He's a con man. Somebody said that. Did you say that? I thought it was. Lillian said, Huck is a con man. He's a lot like the King and the Duke, but there's a big difference. They both lie. They both pretend to be people they're not. They both, in a way, take advantage of other people. But what's the difference?
Huck kind of lies for good, because like if he's lying to like, because for Jim, it's not like it turned back into a slave. Then the common people are lying like that, like stealing.
So what's the good that Huck lies, but it's just not as bad? We all know that. Why? What's not as bad about it? Maybe you just said that, but I didn't quite get it.
It's not hurting anyone.
And do we have sympathy for him?
Well, I was just gonna say, when Huck lies, it's normally to protect somebody or to keep other people safe, but when the common do it, it's to take advantage of people.
Right.
And when the common do it, they lie to better themselves and not better other people.
And yeah, that's very good. Emma.
He also sometimes feels remorse for what he's done, and he also
He
gets
feels what?
He feels remorse for what he's done, and he also gets attached to the people, which you shouldn't do if you're a con man.
Yeah. You remember Peace Child? You remember the idea that they would have that fatten with friendship? And so they would get to know somebody the longer you kept up the charade, the better, So the first guy, that guy, if you remember his name, it was Ye. They had a relationship with him going on for months. And I don't know how somebody could get to know somebody and they're not a bad person, I mean, they're just normal and you actually pretend to like them because you want to kill them. But I just don't know how somebody could do that and eventually kill them. What human nature says is that if you get to know somebody, like To Kill a Mockingbird, walk a mile in their shoes, you're going to understand them and you're not likely to do them harm. That's what would prevent stereotyping and racism if you simply got to know the people. I think that's true. I just don't know how you could kill somebody or hurt somebody after getting to know them, unless they've done you some great harm. So I don't know. That interests me that Huck is that way. As long as he gets to know somebody, he doesn't want to hurt him. He hurt Jim earlier because he really didn't know him, and now he doesn't want to hurt him. And somebody said, maybe it was Lillian again, so one of you said, he has remorse. That's another thing that I meant to highlight, because somebody said it. The King and the Duke never have, that was Emma. The King and the Duke never have remorse. That's another difference. When Huck does something and lies or whatever, he feels bad about it later. He hurt Jim a couple of times earlier, and he finally asked forgiveness for it. All right, so a couple of other things. I don't know, Payne, you got it? Want me to see? All right, I don't know if you remember this. This is a statement. Huck says admiringly of Mary Jane that she had more sand in her than any girl I had ever seen. In my opinion, she was just full of sand. What does Huck mean by sand? That's a crazy thing to say about somebody. Have any idea what he's talking about?
She's sand,
Sand.
Wow. Well, that could imply maybe that she's really like full of herself or something. She's full of sand.
Yeah, the sand symbolizes what, in a sense?
Like.
Well, it doesn't have to be you, but, yeah, you can have
Oh.
it. Anybody? What is the sand maybe, I don't know if anybody knows what he's talking about. Yeah, Emma.
She's full of love for like other people.
Sand is low.
Sand in my boots.
Yeah, all right. Possibly, Julian, what do you think?
I didn't even really know what sand was supposed to mean.
Okay, yeah,
It doesn't have anything to do with the modern term of sandbagging, right?
no. Anybody else? Let me give you since we spent this much time on it, Sam may have an idea. Wait a minute. Say it again.
Could be like grit or like toughness.
Absolutely.
That's what I was gonna say.
All right, absolutely. He likes her because she's strong, she's brave, she's got grit, which is another term some people don't know. But, you've got determination, you've got, we used to say guts, I mean, something like that. You've got a backbone, you can stand up for yourself. There were a couple of things I want to point out about the humor in the book. One of my favorite scenes, and I'm kind of glossing over these questions, and you'll get them, but I think we've actually done most of them. He says that the funeral was comical. I don't know, one of my favorite scenes in the book, I don't know if you remember this, is when they're at the funeral, and you know how it is with a funeral, of all places, church most of the time, but funerals especially, it's pretty somber, it's pretty formal, and people are pretty intense. And while they were having the funeral, there was a cat and a dog got in a fight in the basement. So it made this racket. And so they were trying to have this serious funeral, and this ridiculous racket was going on. And the mortician, the funeral director, he kind of looked at everybody and nodded like, I got this. So he kind of slid out. That was the term that Mark Twain uses, or Huck uses. He slides. In other words, it's the idea of being so smooth that he's overly smooth. Now, I think that's, of all the times in your life, you want somebody to be, even if it's phony, because think about people that work in funeral homes, they don't know any of these people. These are customers. And yet, they have to maintain, of any place, maybe your pastor is the only other person that has to act like he really cares about you. Funeral directors, they have to act that way, even though, how could they? How could they really care for? But anyway, so to be a good funeral director, you would have to have that ability to be really smooth, really calm, unobtrusive. You wear black, you're kind of standing in the corner. And Mark Twain kind of exaggerates that, and he just kind of slides. He slides down the wall. I mean, I can picture a cartoon, sliding down in, because he's trying to be so unobtrusive, he's actually being obtrusive. In other words, everybody's looking at him, and so he goes down there, and you hear this huge, huge thump.
Yeah.
And no more noise, and they come back up the steps. They come back up the steps, and everybody thinks he's the hero. Last question. I think we answered it earlier. Greed proves to be the downfall of the king and the duke. Explain how this is true. mention at least one other instance in the story when greed causes one or more characters to lose everything. Let's do two, because I've already given you one if you were listening. So I need two examples. And these are things I could definitely will point out on the test. So what is a one example of two we need to of when people lose everything? Well, here this is a good example. We already mentioned it earlier too. Example of greed forcing people to go so far that they actually lose everything they already have. Yeah.
The money that was in the coffin.
Plus, remember, what was the greed? The greed was that they were going to have to. They were going to try to sell the house, sell the slaves. Had they just left with the $6,000, they'd have been $6,000 richer. But they had to go further than that, and it cost them everything. Can you think of anybody else in the book? That's an example of. I'm going to suggest a couple. One would, yeah.
I was gonna, was it the widow that wanted to sell Jim? She's like,
Yeah.
selling Jim would probably more money, but she left, so not only she, I don't know, she didn't make the sale, but she's how it worked.
It's certainly greedy on her part, yeah.
Yeah.
The criminal guys that were on that ship when their raft got taken.
Yeah, that's another example.
The wall.
They were willing, they were greedy to get revenge, and it cost them their lives. Had they gotten off the boat, that wouldn't have happened. I think of Pap also. Pap was somebody that, obviously, well, you don't know how it ends, but trust me, he loses it all. Well, I'll get you those. You need to do this reading by Wednesday, and let me tell you I need to see things from Kane, Sarah's not here, Walker, Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, Ryan, I need to see that. The only three people showed it to me, that was Cy and Jeff.
Wait, which one?
And Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
I'll get those to you. Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I'll probably get up with this.
It's Grayson now. Yeah. I would be Mr. Powell, is all I need to show you those questions? I'm good on Huck, right?
No, he doesn't get shot.
Yeah. Also need to see 19 through 23 for Jackson. I still need to see Jackson. Then I need to see Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Got it. Ryan, Jeff, 17 through 18.
Here's my friends.
Which one am I looking at? Occurrence. And I needed to see 17 through 18 from you.
Yeah,
From you.
so
Okay.
I have like a few questions left.
Julian from you, I got that. Jackson from you, and Occurrence at Owl Creek, those two things.
I still after the Huck Finn questions, I still have like a few more.
All right. Lillian, did you take the 20 through 23? I don't have it very well. Did you do it online?
Yes, I think, did you send it online?
Well, I sent it to specific people. I don't think I had it. Just keep the door shut for a minute.
I don't know.
Okay, we need to take care of that.
You know, that's a locus problem. I found it.
Jack, you did one online, didn't you, 22, 23?
Oh, yeah, wait.
There's a quiz for chapter, I think, it's online.
Yeah, I know that one, yeah.
And Tucker's gonna, I can do it.
Have a nice weekend.
See you later. Playing tonight?
Yes, sir.